Well, we're 4 years in. We're 4 years into Bittensor. It's still going. It hasn't exploded yet. It's exploded a couple times, but somehow that explosion was more like the explosions in a combustion engine that took us forward. It's not exactly 4 years, right? So it's coming up in 2026, so it's going to be actually going to be 5 years. Pardon me.
It's about am I kind of correct? Is it 1800 days? Almost 1803. Yeah, almost 5 years. 4.93.
The 5-year cycle. We launched the first block on the 9th, which was the release of the Bitcoin software. So we matched the same day, 2021, and gosh, it's been quite a journey. And now it's not really about Bittensor anymore so much as it's about the subnets. It's so awesome to see everyone here in the crowd. So many faces that people that have been here for years coming back possibly to see this presentation. There isn't much of a presentation because at this point Bittensor is really running by the subnets. It used to be just one subnet, it used to just to be us, but now it's everyone else. Now it's all of the amazing subnet owners that run this project and keep the thing going.
Crazy to think how much has happened since then. I feel like there should be like a montage highlight reel of all the catastrophes we avoided.
Why don't we go through them one by one?
We could. What's the first one you remember?
I mean, the first catastrophe was, of course, the first EMA attack.
No, you are mistaken, my friend. The first catastrophe was done by me and you about a week into the launch in November. We decided to bring down the weight of the extrinsic blocks and accidentally made it so that it's so small that you can't even pass code to actually update the chain. And so the chain became unupdatable for like, what is it? A week after that, we were trying to fix it?
Yes, it was about a week. And we made the block so small that we couldn't upgrade the chain to take the blocks back to the normal size. But I would say there's a catastrophe before that, which was the original fork of Bittensor. Like we are actually in the fork chain. I don't know if people know this.
Mm-hmm.
Bittensor right now is Bittensor 2.0. It's the fork of the original Kusanagi chain chip. That's the original one.
That is true. Yeah.
Shout out to Parallax, who attacked the first version of Bittensor. He was the third miner on the network. Pulled together more than 51% of the stake in the first few months and applied a EMA attack on the network. Fun times.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. It was very fun going back to everybody who wasn't everybody. It was just Polychain DCG at the time. And literally after having just signed the first OTC, going back and saying, hey, so I have an attack, just so you know.
Right around the time that Mr. Carro arrived.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I got kicked from the server. At one time, the Discord got taken over. They were like making announcements and stuff. They were like, oh, you remember this? But it was like February 21 is when me and, I don't know if Prav's in this call. But yeah, me and Prav joined in February 21. Great times.
I still remember the phone call you gave me that day, Carro. Allah, the server's taking over. Oh my God, what do we do?
I know. One of the only times I've ever texted, it's always been through Discord.
Yeah. It was one of the only times you called me. I'm like, shit's going on when Carro calls you.
Rob, tell us about how you got into Bittensor almost 5 years ago.
I know. I was thinking about this the other day. I'm starting to feel a little bit older. And I was thinking about, I was out in the boonies at the time. I was like 20, 21 years old. And I would doom scroll GitHub because this before, you could talk to AI, anything like this, right? This was, you had to do a ton of research on Google, and I'll never forget thinking that like Opentensor / Bittensor, it like just immediately caught my eye. And, I like started watching the project. This was like November of 2020. and I would come back to the page, and y'all added this Discord button to the README. And I remember Max. I think Max was in here, in the Discord chat as well. And how there was only one channel. It was like we would all just talk in general. This is a really great time.
Keith,
Still remember seeing your name pop up on Discord, being like, "Who the hell's Carro and what is that dog?"
Keith, how did you get here with Bittensor?
Yeah, so go back to March 2021. I was given $2 a month to a guy named Michael Garfield to support his podcast. He does a podcast. It used to be called Future Fossils. It's now called Humans on the Loop. And a guy named Rian happened to be in there, who might be on the call today, maybe not, but he invited me into his Discord. And 6 months in that Discord to get within the circle of trust where they unlocked the hidden Bittensor channel, which had probably a dozen of them, some of the most OG miners that are here. And I mined 7 Tao with the template miner that came with the original with the install, and then my 3 Contabo 24 CPU servers got deregistered. I said screw Bittensor, sent my 7 Tao to Rian, and I quit for a month. That's not the first time I've quit for a month, actually. And then a month later, I read the white paper again, realized there's not ever going to be anything better than this, and I threw everything I had at it, and here we are today.
Okay, cool. I like this. Arrash, you're on stage, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear me. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. Welcome to the campfire.
What's going on?
What's your story, man?
What are we doing? What are we talking? Sorry, I just showed up.
How did you get here? What's your story with Bittensor? We're 5 years old.
Oh yeah. Oh my god. All right. So I was about done creating trading strategies, building my own, and then was on social just looking at like what where can I throw some money at something where I think it could be very valuable in the future, right? Like what's like the next big project, and I was asking people in the community and talking to people I know, and everyone was kind of like there was not like a thing. And then I was nothing I was really excited about, and I've been in crypto since 2017, so been through cycles, seen a bunch of things come and go. And then I saw Bad English T's post, actually, like Bet's post about how Tao is transformative, or actually I think he mostly just shit on ETH. And then I was like, and then I think at the end I just went to his profile and I was like, what's Tao? And so from there I just found my way into the Discord, starting asking questions, realized I could run a subnet. And I think within the same day or like next couple days, everyone's like, oh, you should talk to Const. You should talk to Const. Like he'll if you want to run something, you should talk to him. And I was like, okay. And then I looked at your profile, Jake, and it said a Bittensor core dev, and I was like, oh, this guy's one of the core devs. Okay, I should talk to him. And you were like, oh, hey, you can run a subnet. Like you should check it out. And I was like, oh man. So I went back to my team and I was like, oh, I talked to a core dev at Bittensor, and he said we could run a subnet. It sounds like really exciting. And I was like, we should do prediction, right? Like prediction for Bitcoin. That was the big thing because I was like, I want to get additional signals from my existing trading system. And little did I know, Jake, that you were like a co-founder of Bittensor because your account just said core dev. So I was like, I think this guy might like manage like 1 or 2 devs at Bittensor, like Opentensor. I had no idea. And that's kind of how the journey started. And then it's just been iterations, scaling, hiring team members, figuring out our fit. It's just been constant iteration, from there. It's been a journey, but it's been awesome. There's nowhere else I'd rather build. It's just been incredible. And I've never had so much belief in a project as I do Bittensor, to be very honest. Like it's especially building in the ecosystem and just seeing it grow. It's been phenomenal. Now that we have 120 subnets, it's crazy.
Arrash, what's your take on the halving?
Oh, it's super bullish. I think it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's bullish in my opinion. I don't like. I think it's the right direction. I think over time, We'll see. We'll see that it was the right, having it and seeing that its impact on subnets will be a net positive. So, but I think there's people obviously that have concerns, but I mean, as a subnet owner that's been around and seeing, looking and dissecting what it would do, I think it's going to be positive.
Who disagrees? Rizzo, are you a bear? How about you, Shardubal?
I don't know if I'm a bear on the halving. Definitely not a bear on the halving. But got my own story with Bittensor discovery that's a little bit different.
Yeah, tell us.
Okay. Actually, yeah, Ship was my prof. So he was teaching I remember him telling me like, yeah, doing this side project, but also need to make some money. And so he was my prof, CSE 301, our software engineering course. And course went well. He was a dope lecturer, he was a dope professor. I gave him as he likes to say, I gave him a nasty rating on Rate My Prof. That's not true. But yeah, ended up kind of talking to him a little bit more about like trying to work with him in the future. And he was like, yo, dude, we're doing this, like, we're doing federated learning. And I was like, oh, I know about federated learning. I think I can help you guys. And that's how I got introduced to you too, Jake. That was like 4 years ago. Yeah.
Time flies. It's crazy.
Rapido, you're bearish. Rapido.
No, I'm bullish.
I think it'll be a nothing burger, but then later on, then I'll be bullish.
Say more.
It's just because, I mean, it's just another day until the effects of it actually play out, just like any other change.
I think people very much overestimate the need for emission. There's like the fight for emission, but most subnets are way over. They have way too much liquidity.
Yeah, that's why they're burning.
Yeah.
Or trying
Rob.
some other way to hoard it.
I think the halving, of course, is very bullish. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what the bear case would be. Anytime basically over the last 5 years, every time, like in Kusanagi, because there was only like a few people, you could make a lot of Tao. And now that there's way more people, the amount of Tao that you make is way less as a miner. And so with the halving, that's going to continue to increase. And every time that's happened in Bittensor, it's been positive for the growth of the project. So I imagine that the halving will be no different than that.
Mog, do you want to dispel some myths about the halving?
Well,
Which ones? All mine off their machines and go home.
yeah, right. So the common bear case is that sell pressure will remain the same, but liquidity will not be growing as fast. But I think this is kind of a foolish argument, because if people are happy with their liquidity right now, it will still be increasing. And so it's not like a traditional order book where you like need support on one side of the market for the prices to not go down or something like that. It's an AMM, so like liquidity is always increasing. I think that is a really silly argument.
Max, you want to talk to the crowd about Max is leading the research team into improving the AMMs across the entire ecosystem. You want to talk to the kind of things that you guys are thinking over there about how to improve
happy to.
marketing from a market maker perspective?
Yeah, so one of the design issues that led us to start thinking the AMMs yet again was, right now there's this weird condition where essentially when your subnet gets subsidized is when your alpha emission exceeds the alpha block emission for that block. And so we scale down both your Tau and your alpha, and we use the excess Tau that we would have subsidized, or that we would have injected, to buy your subnet token. Yeah, so we have this awkward condition now that we're in the Tao Flow model, where the subsidization essentially occurs when your price is greater than your emission is. It's because we're mixing emissions determined by Tao Flow, but also because we have liquidity at the price ratio, we're sort of constrained by this price constant where we have to still have prices involved in when you get subsidized. And so what we're going to do is we're going to introduce, ideally, balancer style pools where we can provide liquidity asymmetrically. So we can move away from this subsidization condition where price is greater than emissions, which is a very strange thing and can, have weird downstream effects where if you can pump your price high enough, you can, continue to cycle upwards. And we will have the chain provide liquidity asymmetrically and then have a much more sensible subsidization condition where we scale down all the subnets or emissions for all the subnets when the prices are too low and subsidize everybody. So it's like what the original subsidization design was intended to be, we will be able to achieve. So that is the main thrust of research right now, is these asymmetrically provided liquidity pools. There's a potential that we can also bias the liquidity towards Tao and make it easier for prices to go up and harder for prices to go down, although this is an active area of research. So that's what I've been up to, is trying to make the liquidity pools extremely robust.
So based.
One of the things that's really overlooked about the halving is that even though Tao emission is now dropped in half, so is the growth rate of alpha in. Right? So subnet liquidity pools are now more constrained and will have higher volatility when purchases occur, right? So like right now, it's actually very expensive to increase the prices. Very expensive, very difficult. There's just so much alpha liquidity because it goes both ways. We add it at the price level symmetrical to the price. That changes. And I think what we'll see is actually post-halving a slow move to a much more dynamic version of DTAO. And, it's really a matter of perspective. You think that like less Tao emission is bad or good. It actually just changes the overall amount of liquidity in the pools, which are overly liquid right now. And so I'm like overly bullish. And it's odd that people have been like selling into the uncertainty. It's kind of odd to me. But is there any questions in the chat about like what specifically people are confused about, or even on the chat on the stage here? Terrence, how about you?
Oh, I think I understand. So I think what people are saying is the sum of subnets could be like if the equilibrium right now is SOS at 1, and the halving it goes SOS of 0.5.
It doesn't. The SOS is still the you could think of it's not a upper bound, it's a lower bound. So it's not really a lower bound, it's a support level. So at price of 1, sum of 1, the chain just stops selling via root, right? So we don't apply root sell pressure anywhere across the ecosystem lower than sum of 1. So that's what keeps the prices. Helps like the chain. That's when the chain kicks in and starts to behave as a net buyer in many places, because we also purchase the tokens when the emission is below they're above their price. So we see that the chain buys increases, and also the root sell pressure goes away when the sum of subnet prices goes below 1, and that's not changing. So that's remained the same going into the halving. People were worried about that, but that's not changed. Make sense, Rob?
Yeah.
Frank, why are you bearish? Frank, you can't just go ahead and type into the chat, I'm short-term DTAO bearish, and then just stay muted.
Howdy, boys. Yeah, I'm short-term bearish on DTAO. I'm looking at it from just a macro. I think that the halving really helps out. I think it's kind of a nothing burger at first, and then Tao pumps like crazy. And I think when we see that, it's akin to BTC pumping and everything else wanting to get into BTC, and then it slows down, and then everything else goes nuts. I think it's going to mirror the same deal.
But why are you short-term bearish?
Are you just saying from fear, Frank, or are you saying like because of like fundamentals for the bearishness?
No, I'm saying maybe not even fear. I'm just saying that I think that the halving is going to help Tao as a whole, and it's going to make it pump. And when it does, no one wants to miss out. So they start getting out of alpha tokens to ride the Tao wave.
Oh, I see.
And then when that calms down, they start pouring into DTAO.
But that doesn't make any sense, right, Rizzo? Because if you're in alpha tokens, they all rise at the same rate as Tau.
Yeah, but we get a bunch of new liquidity, right? In root.
Ah, I see. Yeah, yields rise, but only if subnet prices are rising relative to Tau.
True.
So it's sort of mitigative. But if Tau pumps, alpha tokens are pumping equivalently. And if alpha tokens pump more than Tau, as in the sum of subnet prices goes, let's say, to 2, then the yield on root doubles. But that's after, well, at the same time as the sum of subnet prices have doubled as well. So again, it's sort of neutral positive. Yeah, I think that like one of the things about the way the system is set up that like all subnets should really think about, I think, is all of the pools are in Tau. So if we make Tau successful, everyone's token price goes up. And hopefully like we've recognized that as a community, which is kind of cool. Like there is no project in anywhere in crypto that has that quality, right? If you have a project on Ethereum, your project doesn't do better because of Ethereum, because your number one peg will be USDT instead of Ethereum, probably. But in Bittensor, all of the subnets have their tokens measured in Tau. So if Tau price goes up, everyone wins in dollar terms.
Definitely. And I think it helps a lot that by default now you're getting alpha. That's going to make a big difference.
Yes. We've also reached a point too where root prop is very low, hardly affecting prices like it did initially almost a year ago when we launched DTAO. Like we're out of the auto sell pressure for the most part. And now it's just a fight against the liquidity, because there's actually almost too much liquidity relative to the market caps of the subnets. I would say there is too much liquidity relative to the market caps of the subnets. And that's now we're moving into a different era where there's going to be much less liquidity relative to market cap, which will help with the market actually moving and being much more elastic.
One interesting way of thinking about that concept is like in the same way that Bitcoin has, loads of BTC locked up, never to be redeemed from Satoshi's wallets. We have massive amounts of Tau locked up into these pools, most of which never to be retrieved because of the way the AMMs work. Unless you're deregistered, like we have so little floating Tau supply that having's going to be super bullish, in my opinion.
Oh, 5girl. We've got 5girl in the chat. I'm short-term bearish TTAO prices as a whole, but it's unrelated to the halving, and I don't think it's a bad thing. With the new emission cycle, I think a lot of pools will start to become depleted, and price of some dead inactive, bad quality subnets can start to come down, and that will drag down the aggregate TTAO market. But you actually think it's bullish for well-performing. So bad, dead, inactive subnets will go down, 5girl, but you expect that active subnets will perform better. Someone figure out where that IP address is so we can figure out who 5girl is. 5girl, what's your IP address?
1705 Aurora Lane, Albuquerque, New Mexico. There's a pizza on the roof.
Very good. We haven't had another conversation about Tao Flow. I know there's been some sort of like broad FUD around Tao Flow itself and the design. Is there any questions from the community about people like have thoughts on it, how it's working, whether or not it's working in the way that they expected it to? Rapido, your thoughts. Rob, your thoughts.
Sorry, I was trying to find a meme. Can you repeat that?
The question was about Tao Flow in general. So, we've had, there's a couple major changes that have come out in the last 3 or 4 weeks, right? So, the big one is MEV protection, I think. for the market. Like you can now just ape in any amount you want without much slippage. There's also Tao Flow and the halving, but we haven't spoken to Tao Flow. I did an analysis. I did a talk about it before it was launched. Now we're post-launch. We've done the initial. It's increasing the kurtosis of the emission. It's pushing out the subnets that can't sequester tau, and pushing up the emission of subnets that can. Rob, what's your take on it so far? On that change?
I think it's been a great change. It's nice that the emission prices can move more, right? Before, I think when it was tied to price, there was, especially when like some of subnets was super high, right? It felt like there was like, it was like a slow turn down because there's like a momentum almost to it. Whereas now it feels much more snappier, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
So something I've noticed is that like a lot of emission prices will be like exactly, or a lot of the emission values will be the same as their prices, which I actually think makes a lot of sense, right? Especially given what Max was just saying. So I think it's been overall, it incentivizes the right behavior as well, which is that like, especially if you want to like buy back, right, and return the revenue, like make it a sustainable flywheel. I think it also incentivizes that, which is good for some owners.
It should match the price long term. Like the EMA of the flow is basically the price because the flow is the derivative of the price without the constant multiplier of liquidity. So it actually just ends up being sort of like a rough approximation of price over time. Which is good, right? So it's just it removes the bias from overly liquid subnets and helps newer subnets that don't have the liquidity. And I think that's very positive for the ecosystem. Like we focus on the thing that we want the emission vector to be incentivizing. These people that are pushing and holding alpha tokens, the subnets that can get people to hold long term. Okay, so no pushback there. Rob, you're positive. Shib?
I was just gonna say this is all given. There's no real pushback from my end, but I'd like to kind of surface some stuff for discussion, which is basically how Tao Flow behaves when a subnet experiences long periods of negative flow, because emissions are now tied to the EMA of net staking, if I'm understanding correctly, right? So a subnet that consistently keeps losing stake over time is going to eventually get zero emissions. And so once emissions stop zero, it's a death spiral. No new alpha enters the pool, liquidity dries up, and then it's kind of over. It's intended behavior, but what can subnets that are experiencing this, that are legitimate, do to prevent this problem?
Is it a problem?
It makes subnets more fragile. That's one argument against it, but it is intended behavior. So personally, I'm with it, but I would kind of wanted to bring it up to get the discussion in front of the community, kind of talk about, how a subnet owner can mitigate this problem if it happens to them.
So if you're a subnet that experiences long-term outflow, that's equivalent to having a zero price. Mm-hmm. So it's not exactly the same, but it's very similar too, right? Because if there's only net outflow from your subnet, your price would go to zero. The difference is that there were some subnets that were in a state of just burning through their liquidity. Mm-hmm. And until they can begin to change that directionality, right, to bring flow in, the chain shouldn't pay them as they fall off a cliff, right? The chain now cuts its losses. But it doesn't really. It just doesn't really change the behavior for a subnet. It really shouldn't change the behavior of subnet. A subnet should be attempting to get positive flows into their pool, mm-hmm. Whether or not it's price-based emission or flow-based emission, it's the same thing.
It's the bread and butter. They have to do it.
If you can't get positive flows, you're screwed. both in price-based emission and Tao Flow based emission.
Regardless, yeah. But the difference is
the chain
Okay.
reacts faster. The difference is the chain reacts faster.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. That's the only thing I wanted to bring up. Just kind of,
In terms of
other person there. Go ahead.
in terms of research-based subnets, this is something that like people have spoken about. Like, okay, hey, if a subnet can't get revenue, how is it going to get revenue? And the revenue meme is something that has persisted since the very beginning of DTAO. And like, perhaps we should put that to bed now at the halving. Like, there's if you're a pure commodity subnet, like a good example would be, say, Celium 51, or maybe Shoots or Targon, a pure commodity subnet. You guys are provisioning expensive items for sale. If you're paying for thousands of B200s to be available and none of them are for sale, you don't have any revenue, that subnet necessarily has millions of dollars of outflow. And so they would be considered a commodity subnet, and they need revenue or they're going to die. But if you're a subnet like, let's say, Red Team or Yanis or Ridges, where the cost to develop what you're developing is not much, right? There's some coders there that are writing a couple lines or innovating. There's no automatic sell pressure. There's actually not that much need to generate even inflows if your miners are not necessarily needing to sell. Okay, then on top of that, even subnets that do have that cost, like Targon or Liam, most of what is maintaining the price is actually investor speculation. It's not flow via, and Rob, you can attest to this, right? If not all of the flow for Targon is from people purchasing the token. It's not coming from revenue. So the revenue myth, I don't know. I don't even know. Can someone explain to me where that came from? That the subnets are required to make revenue so early on?
I don't think that came from anywhere. I think it's just mostly when you build a product, you don't want to just depend on Tao Flow emissions, right? You want to get revenue externally as well to kind of have both sources of revenue. But I'm not aware of anybody sort of making it into a thing where you must do that because it depended on the chain or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it comes from a logic of, well, how do you attract Tao into your pool? And you can market and sell a vision of what your subnet will be able to do in the future. But doing that for sustained periods of time is difficult, particularly in a market where I think a lot of the capital circulates around between the subnets, right? Like there's this cohort of, we can call them like traders. And so creating or sort of pandering to that group of people can be dangerous because they're in it purely for a profit. So and they're playing on short time frames. Whereas if you do something like revenue, you can build independent of that, because now, regardless of whether or not traders come and go, you can have a sustainable economic model that can grow at a reasonable pace. Now, is that going to grow at a 1,000% a year? If you have to make revenue today, I think that this is something that's debated not just in Bittensor, but in the broader markets, right? The difference between like the Warren Buffett approach versus the Jeff Bezos approach or the Mr. Beast approach. And so, it really comes down to those different types of philosophies. But I understand why the meme of revenue is, it's more about independence than anything else.
It's very hard to produce significant revenue in short times, and that's kind of an obvious. But I would say it is important for subnet owners to be able to tell the story of their product market fit, their go-to-market strategy, what's the total addressable market, and think in terms of revenue, right? Like how are you speaking in terms of cost versus your inflows versus your outflows. So I think flows, obviously with Tao flows, I think flows and speaking to flows is incredibly important. And that comes to storytelling, right? Like how can you tell your story effectively, and how what you're building is disruptive. So I don't think it's necessarily like a concentration on like, oh my God, they need to bring in revenue this second. It's more, how is this going to progress and how do you track it, right? We always talk about, Jay, like up and to the right. Like where is your up and to the right? What are your KPIs? How does that improve with time? How do you show it? Right. And so like that's what I think is most important. It's not necessarily like, oh, you got to have 10 million in revenue tomorrow. Well, that's just like unrealistic. But if you show growth and how you measure growth, I think that's really significant. I think that's really what people are looking for right now. Is like, what is the measurement? What are your margins? Like, what are you trying to do, right? And how is this disruptive? Right, like a real product, like any startup would have to show.
Distributed. Tell us about research subnets.
They're fucking awesome, man. We don't need revenue. No. But seriously, it's like going into detail. It's very different from a builder's perspective, and honestly, I too have been, almost partially brainwashed into the whole revenue thing. And it's okay, like, stuff like commodity subnet, they have to show revenue. They have to show revenue. But luckily for them, they have the easiest paths to revenue. Like, but I truly believe that we've all lost faith with this revenue fetish has made us lose faith. And Bittensor was meant to inspire. You were meant to create like fucking amazing shit. But if you're focused on revenue month one, you're just going to build a fucking SaaS. So I'm not saying like it's a bad thing, but revenue shouldn't drive us, because once you see that revenue, then what? You understand what I'm saying? When we go through the paths of revenue, yeah, we're not building Bittensor anymore. We're trying to build the Web2 equivalent of Bittensor, which I think we should always do better than that. So yeah, research subnets will be okay. And I think for me, when the penny dropped was when I just looked at, hold on, no one else is making any money. If it's about making, honestly, it's about revenue. Let's all pack our money into Shoots, Liam, Targon, and let's sack all the rest of them up. But prices are based on forward expectations, and how you build those forward expectations is up to your imagination. Like Arrash and his 50 partnerships.
Igor, tell us about. You're actually probably. Oh, did he leave? No, he's still. Yeah, Igor, tell us about Tao Flow, and like why you're excited about it.
Hey, you hear me?
Igor is from Tao 5, by the way, everyone. If you don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it's a really good way forward for the whole ecosystem. So in my view, it just incentivizes the right thing. So sequestering Tao, and it can be achieved, as we discussed, independently of whether you are a research subnet or you're a revenue-based subnet. If you are a research subnet, I think your decisioning should be around really incentivizing community, or like promoting your subnet into community and creating community around your project, so that this community buys into the alpha and it allows subnet to actually fund their future developments. And for revenue-based subnets, it's easier. So you find your way for the business, you generate revenues, and you get funding from Tao and from revenues that are coming into the platform. Yeah, I think it's a great update, really. So I'm bullish.
We have Michaela on stage. Thanks for coming up.
Hey, I'm going to say we're part of the research and development subnets. And I think sometimes people miss that piece, and it's really about time horizons. And I want to echo what Sam is saying, that people have lost faith. Like, I think we can't really lose sight in all of this like revenue discussion that we're like creating an entirely new paradigm. And when we're asked about revenue, it's like, of course, like we care about revenue and we're working on developing assets that can be even like $1 trillion deal in and of themselves. So the question for me is kind of like how do you show meaningful progress towards these large goals? How do you build faith around those values? And we've done that by basically like evolving our tech nonstop and really adapting to Bittensor. So I think we should draw a little bit of inspiration of like Dogecoin's market cap and be like, let's not pigeonhole ourselves on the practical reality that's right in front of us, and let's dream a little bit bigger, because we're talking about some of the most speculative assets of all time, and that can be channeled in the right direction. Some of our community members like ask us, well, like, okay, that's great, like your asset can be like hundreds of millions of dollars. How do we know that you're going to like drive that value back to alpha? Which I think is a fair question. And without putting myself in a bind from like a regulatory perspective, I would say it's also the reason why these companies eventually IPO, because you can have a compounding effect on the achievement of these milestones. And you can basically reward people for being seed investors in what otherwise is not accessible to the average person. Like, you get to make VC level money as an average person, but that requires you having VC level conviction and the ability to discern who, of the 128 is committed enough to take it all the way.
I love that. VC level money as a normal person. Exactly. Like right now, and from the very beginning, investors in detail have had the opportunity to get on the ground floor. There was a bit of early hubris. I was part of that hubris. But I still think we're still in a position where a lot of these projects are just so, from my perspective, so undervalued. And as long-term bets, especially after the halving, and as we continue to make changes, small incremental changes that improve the economics, that make it easier to invest, and make this so there's less slippage, we can just continue to do that ad infinitum. Whether or not it's privacy preserving, MEV resistance, updated balancer pools, new ways for people to invest. Like one of the things that we would like to do is also to elicit more, groups of individuals inside the ecosystem, like validators, to play a more important role in managing funds and helping people invest and actually helping teams. I think it's like since DTAO, the validators have taken such a massive step back. We really want to enable them to help the market grow. Let's go to we have not heard from Keith. Actually, we have heard from you, Keith. But
yeah, from Terrence. We haven't heard from Terrence.
I want to hear from Terrence. He says he's not speaking. He's just here on stage to take up a position. You're being removed. I'm banning you. T-Slice.
Yo, that was such a king move by Terrence. I love that. Yeah, I guess there's two things here. There's the halving and then there's Tao Flow. So which one do you want me to say something about?
Halving.
Okay. So halving, Cole's notes, macro bullish, because price, the scarcity of Tao, etc. Mirroring Bitcoin, all of that. We just have this added dimension of alpha, and the alpha issuance is on its own halving schedule. So, what I predict, what we'll see is it won't happen all at once, but since the alpha, it's like if you have a token and you have an LP pair, but you keep issuing tokens to the holders, like what can you imagine will happen to that pair, right? The pair will balance accordingly because people have more tokens than the LP, which is no longer growing at the same rate. So that's why I say I'm bearish on the price of alpha denominated in Tau, but Tau price go up. So I think what you said at the very start of DTAO is people who play the alpha game over years are going to be winners. People in the short run have decisions to make. Let's say that.
We have our bear.
Yeah, I was like, am I going to have to be that guy?
Well, I'm going to kick you from the Discord server now. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's just because of the alpha, like the Tau happening is bullish for Tau, but like I said, if the alpha issuance stays the same while the LP growth halves, I mean, I think, I don't think I'm that smart, I don't think my observation's novel, let's put it that way. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm here.
Let's bring Maciej Kula. Maciej Kula, I want to hear from you. If he's available. Maciej?
Hi.
What's your take on the state of DTAO now after the halving? Where you want it to go? What are you thinking about?
I think wanting to go would be probably up. Yeah, but I think from the recent changes, the way how, for example, the emissions have changed, I like the change to the inflow EMAs instead of prices, so that it removes the whole liquidity advantage, like essentially removing liquidity from the equation. I think I kind of brought up this whole discussion 3 months ago with the injections halving, but the emissions not, which essentially, if the same amount of alpha is being still sold after the halving, because less liquidity comes in, it would have a larger liquidity impact than before. But I think in general, what is still relevant, if the inflows are still larger than the outflows, then the price will still continue to go up. I think that's the main thing that matters. So it's not like that it will be a big issue. I think it will be probably more difficult for new subnets because they will have to, they are in this chicken egg condition where they have no liquidity for people to really put in a lot of Tau, but they need liquidity to get emissions. And without emissions, they will not get any injections. So that's the only thing where I would potentially say it would be more difficult for new people to create subnets in the future. Yeah, but overall, I'm probably pretty bullish on DTAO overall.
I actually think that if you look at new subnets, because they have a higher root prop, there tends to be a bias towards maintaining their price because there's a large number of people that buy and sell the subnets based on their price. They just market make them. This is what we saw with, for instance, it turned out to be an advantage to Affine to have such a high root prop for this reason. People sort of maintain the prices. So the root, that helps with the inflow. And we actually see that new subnets do have higher on average emission. Ali Kabar is an example. So perhaps you're right, perhaps you're wrong, but I actually think you're wrong.
Yeah, I think we would have to see how it will go because it's not really defined. It can be a problem, maybe it won't be. It all in the end depends how the market treats subnets. So if people will still keep buying them and everything, then yeah, it doesn't really matter how the injections will change. So I think we will have to see just how it plays out and which direction it will take.
Mark, you're a voice in the eco. Tell us your thoughts. Mark Jeffrey.
Hello. It's been a while. So anyway, yeah, I mean, look, I'm sort of watching all the new developments with Tao Flow like everyone else. I've learned to trust the designs that you guys come up with, even if I don't totally endorse right away or understand right away everything that you guys have put into it. I do have some worries about it. I've talked to some of you about this. I worry about, especially for subnets that have hard costs, that their miners have to sell their Tau in order to survive. What does that mean? Does that mean that that will decrease the Tau flow, which will decrease, which will eventually lead to potentially to a situation where there is no flow going into the miners are no longer getting emissions, which means they'll leave that subnet potentially, right? So I do worry about that, but that does not seem to be happening right now. And so the design seems to have accounted for, that kind of those sorts of dynamics. But those are the things that are on my mind, and I'm sort of hanging back and watching before sort of making heavier moves, I guess, with Stilcore or even with my own bags.
Where we, it's important to remember that the miners are paid in alpha, and alpha prices are based on the liquidity pools, of which there is a ton of liquidity, almost too much. If we have the rate of liquidity injection, we don't have the prices of the pools. So miners don't see their daily rewards decrease or have with the halving. And that's a really important point, right? If we were still pre-DTAO, it would be the case, right?
Yes. Understood. But a lot of subnets are going to be chopping their miner emissions in half in order to, to basically to combat the effects of the halving, right? That's been my understanding.
And this is maybe one of the reasons why we should have this call. More than anything, is just to dispel that myth, because there's not really any reason for it. Let's take as an example, like, as you guys know, you've heard this concept of the ADR or NAV. There is a large number of subnets on Bittensor that have more liquidity than they have market cap. In fact, Shoots has more liquidity in its pool than the USDC USDT liquidity pool on Ethereum. So let that sink in for a second. One subnet on Bittensor has more liquidity than the USDC USDT, the two probably most important stable coins in the Ethereum ecosystem. And the rate at which liquidity increases is just changing. So the need to have your miner emissions is I don't really fully understand it. Can someone, Mark, can you explain the thought process there? Why that needs to happen? Feel that need.
Yeah, I think the thinking is, and I've said this, and I've seen other people say it. So this is the thinking. The thinking is that because we're now having the subnet token, the alpha tokens, and the Tau that is going into the pools. The rate at which there will eventually be less liquidity to sell into because the pool is no longer growing at the same rate that it was, right? So if my miners are selling at a constant rate to cover their hard costs, then that is eventually going to impact the price of my subnet token because there's less liquidity over time to sell into that pool, which is now shrinking in terms of the rate at which it's being replenished by the chain. Now, you've said that basically the curve pool of Tether and USDC, I believe you're referring to the curve pool on Ethereum, is less than what we're seeing for some of the top subnet pools. So this shouldn't be a worry, but that is the worry.
Right, I understood that. It's also important to note that like the liquidity is not going to be decreasing. Right, the liquidity will still be increasing. Now, for those that are worried about having it would be equivalent to subnets that have gone up or down on the ranking for emission, right? So if you've gone from a 0.4% emission subnet to a 1% emission subnet, or a 0.5 to a 1% emission subnet, or a 1% emission to a 0.5% emission, a subnet, except for the change in price, which was happened before the fact, won't really notice that change when it comes to liquidity. Their liquidity is still increasing over that time, and that's basically what's going to happen to every subnet on Bittensor. So at this point, I think we actually just have to go and see. Like some people, you can't really trust ideas until you feel them viscerally. So it's exciting. We're all, we're leaping over a cliff. I'm not worried about it at all. But for some people, it is like a big question mark, and it's very exciting, though. I think if you can see that there's somewhere we're going to land for sure. That's happening Sunday, guys. So we're the first Bittensor halving should kick into effect sometime on Sunday. We have some minor upgrades going out next week. We'll talk about them next week, specifically the move to default keep, which is actually going to be pretty exciting for subnets because we're going to have a lot more holders per subnet and less auto sell pressure for those that can get their root stakers to hold on. I think that's really exciting as well. Another bullish signal for subnets, right? Because there's going to be less auto sell pressure, and instead it's more holders. All these things are good. So, that's why we had the call today. Thanks for everyone for coming, and obviously the people coming up on stage and giving their perspectives and their stories to how they joined Bittensor. 5 years in, it's been absolute pleasure to be one of the leaders of this project for all this time. Thanks to everyone: Shardol, Ala, Shrimp, Rizzo, Igor, Maciej, Michaela, T-Slice, Rob, Arrash, Samuel, Mark, Jeffrey, and Max. Thanks for coming on stage and sharing this moment with us, as well as everyone else in the community. Thanks, y'all. Let's leave it here.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Happy halving, guys. Bye.
Happy halving.
Opentensor!
Woo!